There we go.
What is up, Bears fans? It is draft week. We know you have questions. We hopefully have some answers, but we're going to go through a bunch of scenarios today to try and get you ready for all the eventualities. Of course, that's not totally possible, but we're happy to try. And before we dig into all that, Kieran, how are you, man?
I am good. I am on the off week of where my son doesn't have me sick. So it is good. It's timed up well with the draft. So yeah, no, it's great. It's an exciting time. We've been kind of talking about this for the last couple of weeks, and kind of the mayhem of the last few weeks are gonna be all coming to the forefront in about 48 hours time. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it is already starting to crank up. I know we've been talking behind the scenes while this has been going on, and the rumor mill pretty much hit warp speed this morning. This is when everybody starts digging in, trying to figure out what's going to happen, because the general narrative about this draft has been after pick, some say 3, some say 4, doesn't really matter. It is the Wild West, and nobody's really sure what's going to happen after that point, and there could be a lot of movement. Now, there's been a lot of speculation up to this point that there would not be a lot of trades because of that very even grading throughout the first round and a low number of what people would call blue chip players or first round graded players. Sounds like that wall might be breaking down a little bit. Multiple folks have posted today. Matt Miller, who we've had on this show, and lots of other folks I've talked to have said that market is heating up. Teams are starting to, I don't want to say deal, but talk about those deals in very firm terms, as if, hey, if our player's there and we call you, what will it cost to move up to X, Y, or Z pick? That is occurring, and that pace is picking up. That frequency took a sort of marked jump from yesterday to today, and it won't slow down before draft time. This is going to be, like you said, an interesting time, a wild time, and it's going to be a wild draft. We've said this the entire time, that because of that uncertainty, because of the unsureness about trade value, this is going to be an all over the board kind of draft where players who you had ranked later go much earlier, folks who you thought were going to stay put move up or down, and then some guys that you were sure were late rounders are going to go off the board 2 or 3 rounds early. And that was usually like the Patriots drafting a Rutgers safety in round 3, but it's going to be multiple teams across the league this year. So there's going to be a lot of intrigue, a lot of motion. It's going to be tough to keep up with, but it's also going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's an unpredictable draft. Last year, I think the top 12 to 14 picks, I'd say most people had about 60 to 70% of those picks correct, which is very rare. I think this year it's going to be way less, because really after the first 3 picks, it's kind of a minefield where you don't know what's going to happen. Like, speaking to different people from the different teams, especially when you just look at Jacksonville, you ask one person and it's one thing, you ask somebody else and it's something completely different. That's what you're seeing even the national guys this week. Some saying like Tet at 5, others being like Mason Graham. Then you have Adam Schefter saying it's not going to be Mason Graham. So then you hear, will it be Jeanty? Will it be an offensive lineman? No, they're going defensive line. It just goes to show this year there's not really a consensus on even just the prospects at the top of the draft. And if you think you don't have a consensus at number 5, how are you going to guess number 15, 16, 7? Like, it's just not going to be the case. And it's going to leave a lot of fans scratching their head for a couple of players, whether it be in round 1 or round 2, because they're not going to see those guys in those consensus mock drafts. Because I always say to fans that love that, doing the interactive mock drafts and stuff like that, a lot of those picks and players that are available at your team are based on what the vast majority of fans are picking, because that's the way those algorithm works. So when you see a Travion Henderson get picked in the first round and it completely blow whatever mock draft you've been doing for like the past 3.5 months, it's going to happen. Like, there's going to be guys that we see in every single mock going to like in the second round and the third round, and then suddenly they're a first round pick, and it's going to blow everything out of the water. And it's what makes the draft actually fun. I don't like the predictable ones. Like, you want a bit of chaos as long as it's not your team that's involved in the chaos. But yeah, I'm really excited for Thursday. I think it's going to be fun to just watch. Hopefully the Bears make a good selection, and if that happens, you can just sit back and enjoy the rest of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much my ticket throughout this. If you follow my work on this channel or any other channel or social media, really my sort of go-to for the past couple of weeks has been get out of round one with a good football player. I don't care if it's at 10. I don't care if it's at 25. I don't care if it's at 5. Like, I don't really want to trade up, but I want that sticky note that says, from draft day that says blank or bust, but it really, mine just says get a good football player. And I don't really care if he was the 20th ranked football player on somebody else's board, because again, boards are going to be all over this year. Make sure he fits your football team, make sure your coaches are comfortable with him, and get a good football player. There's a bunch of good football players. Now we can debate, are they first rounders? Are they second rounders? This is a weird year. I don't really care. I'm going to throw all that out the window. And like you said, as long as the Bears come out of round one with a good football player, I'm really just going to lock in for day 2 and look at 39 and 41, because those are incredibly valuable picks. And we'll talk about those a little bit. But the way we're going to run the top of this show is 3 different scenarios. We're going to talk about if we had our choice of players that might be there, who we'd pick. If we had to pick defense, who we would pick. And in the nightmare scenario, we're going to lay out the nightmare scenario for the Bears, which really is Jeanty and Warren off the board, 3 offensive tackles off the board, 1 probably going to the Saints. What do you do then? Because that is almost everybody that's been mocked to the Bears for months and months. Let's just say we have to stick and pick at 10 in that scenario. How do we sort of fulfill my sticky note? How do we just get a good football player and move on to 39 or 41? So, Kieran, I'll start with you on the first one. If the board's open and somebody that might fall to the Bears falls to the Bears, in your mind, who is the slam dunk? I'm super happy about it. I'm walking away and just enjoying the rest of round 1.
For anybody that's kind of followed me over the last couple of years with the draft, this is going completely against what I normally talk about, because I normally am not an advocate for drafting running backs high, because I normally say build the offensive line and you can make a running back that is a middle round running back look very good. But then the Bears hired Ben Johnson, and they signed and traded for 3 offensive linemen. And I just feel like this is the type of draft where there are not a lot of, I like to say, bona fide first round picks in it, because there's too much variance from pick 10, 11, 12 to pick 50. So that's where it's not normal. Normally, I think on an average from the last couple of years, I've graded out where there's like 15 or 16 guys. I'm like, yeah, they're definitely first round picks. This year I have about 7. So it's just different. So I think the obvious one here for me is Ashton Jeanty. Again, like I said, it goes against everything that I've kind of spoken about before. But when you talk about a guy like him, you could arguably say he's the best player in the draft. You take position out of it in terms of pure talent, and you're just great. If you were grading them like players coming into college football, and who's the number 1 player of the recruiting class, he would be up there with the likes of Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter for me. So he would be kind of one of my ideal options. I'm not gonna go to the whole like if Abdul Carter falls, because that's not happening. Right. Like those top 3 guys are gonna be there, or gonna be there in the top 3. I think the only other one that I can think of that's within that top of the range, and it's not offensive line, because I'm not sold on a lot of those guys. It's Tyler Warren, because again, the talent speaks for itself. I like the offensive linemen, but there's holes in all of them. Like Will Campbell, right? Can he be your left tackle moving forward? My worry is if he's not your left tackle moving forward, you have a problem, because as we've mentioned in the show, I don't know how great he would be if you had to push him inside. And then you look at a guy like Kelvin Banks, who will probably be there at 10, maybe, depending on what teams like in terms of those offensive tackles. He's the one that I feel okay about in terms of being an offensive tackle, just because I know if it doesn't work out there and Braxton Jones ends up starting for you, he could play on the inside, and I wouldn't really feel too bad about it. And he's getting all this late push because he probably deserves it, and people have been looking at some of the other guys. But again, I don't think that would be one where if it hit to 10, would I be like, this is the best possible scenario. For me, of the players that are going to be available after the top 3 guys get selected, the next 2 in terms of pure talent that I like is those 2 that I mentioned in terms of Ashton Jeanty and Tyler Warren. So I'm hoping if the Bears do stick at 10, one of them falls, or if they move up for somebody, that it's for one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Ashton Jeanty is my number 1 choice here if he somehow falls to 10. Now, I love the draft because a couple of months ago, I said Ashton Jeanty was a good pick at 10. This was right after December, starting around January, before the combine. And people said, you're an idiot. You don't take a running back at 10, because they hadn't studied the whole draft. I get it. They didn't understand that those great offensive tackle options just weren't out there this year, that those great edge rusher options, the things the Bears really could use in the top 10, and again, positions you typically take in the top 10, were just not there. Or if they were, they had a lot of question marks, and that was going to stack up over time. So I was slightly ahead of the curve there, but I just kind of stayed quiet and waited, because I said, look, he's a great player. He's a great fit. Everybody's like, no, that would be a huge waste of a pick. And here we are, week of the draft, and people are like, he's never getting to 10. Oh, we'd be so lucky to get him at 10. And they're right. And it's the same position, but it's the difference of 2.5 months of draft prep and draft study, and that happens. So I still believe in Ashton Jeanty. I believe he'd be a great fit. I know the Bears are very interested in his services. I am not an advocate of a trade up, especially if it costs 39 or 41. Because I think of those picks as extremely valuable this year. And in general, I'm just not a fan of trading up. As much as I love Ashton Jeanty, and you know that's a lot, it's still a bit for me to swallow to say, no, he's our guy, because our last GM got us into trouble in that particular little exercise of, nope, we've picked our guy and we're going to sell the farm for him every year. And we're going to end up running short on depth 2 or 3 years down the road because of that practice. So Jeanty is my guy if he's there. Absolutely. If he's not there, and there's been a ton of focus on offense for the Bears with Ben Johnson being the head coach, this being the first pick of the Ben Johnson era, everybody's been leaning into offense. Let's flip the script a little bit and say Jeanty's off the board. Maybe Warren's off the board too. And they're not going to pick Banks. They're going to go defense. If you had to pick defense in this draft, what would you do, Kieran? Not what do you think the Bears will do, but what would Kieran Hall, GM of the Bears, do if he had to pick defense at 10?
So this is a tough one because I'm probably going to piss off a lot of people. I'll do it at 3 levels because there's guys I like that I would be fine with at the three levels. And unfortunately for people that do like Mason Graham, he's not on my list. So yep. I will go for kind of an interior guy, an edge rusher, and then there's kind of 2 wild cards. So if I had to pick an edge rusher that will be there in the first round, it's a tough one, as we said when we were talking to Matt Miller. The only guy that I think I could stomach is probably Michael Williams, because I know the injury did kind of affect him this year, and there is talent there, and it fits the mold of a Dennis Allen type guy. I don't want Pierce. I don't want like some of the other guys that have been spoken about around that area, just because I don't think that the Bears will pick them because of kind of certain issues that have kind of come out. But then if I had to look at the interior, like Walter Nolan is a guy I like. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that you go for at 10, but I know that if they did pick him, I'm like, okay, that's a good player. And that's what you look for. My kind of 2 to 3 wild cards. One, I know your good friend Brett Coleman picked him in his mock draft.
Yeah.
Malachi Starks is a guy that, again, position might not be the most obvious one for a lot of fans right now, but do you know what the likes of Brisker is going to be, Bayard's going to be? They mentioned that they want to have Kyler Gordon being used in another position, and you could easily have him play nickel as well. So there's some versatility there that you could use. And again, I'm only looking at this as talent trumps position right now, because there's not a lot of guys at the top of the draft that I feel great about. Malachi Starks is a guy that if he comes in here, I don't worry about his talent. And I know that he'll be a contributor. The other two guys, which are a little bit more wild cardish, we've spoken about them on this podcast before. Jahad Campbell is one guy, and then Jalen Walker. So Jalen Walker, I mentioned it, I think it was in our last live show, that he's a guy I really like in terms of that hybrid linebacker. You can bring him up for like certain kind of pass rush packages and things like that. And we've seen guys like that being used in Dennis Allen's defense before, the Demario Davis type. So if he was the pick, I don't think I'd be mad about it, because I know, like, talented player, same thing for some of these other guys that I mentioned. Would I be like pumping my fist for any of these guys versus what I mentioned in the first? No. But would I be mad? Absolutely not, because I look at all those players and they're all talented. They can all contribute very, very early. And ultimately, I don't worry about the positional value or if you have a guy in a position, because every year that changes. Like, suddenly we're not talking about corner, and then Tyreek Stevenson has a bad year, and then suddenly corner is a big deal, right? Or safety, nobody's thinking about it now, but then suddenly Brisker doesn't play most of the year, and everyone's like, oh, well, we need a safety now because Bayard is out of contract and Brisker can't play. So I don't really care about where we have players right now. Like, if you see a defensive tackle that you really like let's say the Bears do like Mason Graham, if they want to go in that direction, I'm not going to be mad about it, because we have 3 or 4 defensive tackles. You signed somebody, you drafted Javon. It doesn't bother me, because things can change so quickly in terms of what your needs are going to be. So I think those are the guys that I've mentioned that I would be fine with at 10. But again, I still think I'd be more ecstatic if it was one of the guys that we spoke about in the first question.
Yeah, we're doing this in order for a reason. If we had to pick defense, if I was the GM of the Bears and I'm at the war room at the table and I've got the cards and we've got to pick defense for whatever reason, we've decided organizationally that's the way we should go. My guy would be Derek Harmon if he was healthy, because, God, the thing I hate the most about this week specifically, the week leading up to the draft, is you start to get some of those medicals leaked, and it's for a reason, and I hate that too. But it sounds like Derek Harmon is a shoulder. Now, we don't know who loves the shoulder, what the condition in the shoulder is. We're not doctors anyways, but there is some injury concern for some teams with Derek Harmon and a shoulder. I've heard some similar things about other offensive players that we might mention in the next question. But somebody mentioned Will Johnson in the chat, and Will Johnson's knee is apparently rubbish. Now, a lot of people love the player. I understand it, but corners that have, bad wheels, not taking him in the top 10 for sure. Again, if he slides a little bit, could he be a fit in the system? He could. He's better zone corner than man corner, but he's an absolutely talented player. But you got to be comfortable with that joint hanging out and taking an NFL load, and that's not something I feel really good about based on the way people have talked about that injury. So if Harmon had a clean medical sheet, he would be my guy. Disruptor out of the University of Oregon, very powerful top half, really stirred the drink for that very talented defensive line. He would be my guy. Nolan would be the alternate. I think he is also talented. He's a little farther down my board, but he's my DT2 in this class. So again, if they thought Nolan was better or were more comfortable with his medicals or whatever else, that would probably be where I would go first. Defensive tackle is incredibly valuable, especially if you hit on it. The Bears could use a little more juice in that rotation. If I had to go edge, I think I would pass. I don't think I love any of the edges enough to take him at 10. I would probably take a defensive tackle, maybe even one of the first 3 or 4 defensive tackles for me before I would dip into the edge market, whether it was Michael, who I would probably go for because he's a really good fit with TA. But again, got to be comfortable with the injury history. Jalen Walker is a tougher fit for me. Yes, DA has used some guys, DA being Dennis Allen, has used some guys like Jalen Walker in his defense like that a little more creatively, but fit is going to be so important for Jalen Walker. Great, great athlete, but not super effective out of the middle. Doesn't have that positional versatility that Jihad Campbell does in terms of being able to play in the middle or on the edge. He's really more of an edge guy, and he's good on the edge. This is Jalen Walker. He's a little bit light, but he shows power. He shows the ability to get around, but he really has to do it from depth. He is not a guy you're going to line up across from a tackle and say, go get him. So again, usage is this really narrow band, and he's effective there. But again, that doesn't feel like a top 10 pick to me. So it would probably be Harmon or Nolan. And then I would probably pivot to Jihad Campbell because he does have a ton of positional versatility. He does give you flexibility in terms of what you're going to do with Tremaine Edmonds down the road. Or immediately could turn into a Giants situation. Like if they do draft Abdul Carter, everybody's been saying they're going to trade Kayvon Thibodeau. If you draft Jihad Campbell, you might be looking to trade Edmonds. Not saying that's going to happen, but he would probably just be same as you. Not that inside linebacker is the position you want to take high in the draft based on salary or anything else, but in terms of talent and players who are versatile and I'm pretty sure would just be good football players. Those are probably my 3 guys. I'm going to take Harmon or Nolan or Jihad Campbell. And after that, I'm just going to kind of look for other options. But those would be my 3 if we're doing defense. So now comes the hard one. This is the nightmare scenario for Bears fans. I was presented with this actually yesterday in Coleman's mock draft. I was there to sort of chirp and try and keep him on the rails. Didn't work for the Malachi Starks pick, but there you go. I like Malachi Starks, by the way, but picking a safety in the top 10 is really rough business, especially for the safety, because it holds them to an incredibly high standard. Last safety pick in the top 10 was Derwin James, and Malachi Starks is a really good player, but he's not Derwin James. Again, it's a weird year. You do what you can. In this particular scenario, Jeanty's off the board, Warren's off the board, 3 offensive tackles are off the board because Banks went at 9 to the Saints. That's pretty much everybody the Bears have been talked about taking. So we're just gonna try and prepare you for the worst possible thing. If that happens to the Bears, and nobody's calling, nobody wants to trade up to 10 because of this very even continuum of talent, what do you do? And so who would your pick be at 10 when you really are just going to drop into, okay, good football player mode for the Bears if that scenario were to come to pass?
I, first of all, walk out of the draft room and take a deep breath.
Yeah. An important step in crisis situations.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess my head says, like, it really depends on where they view some of these offensive talented players. So like like you said, let's say Campbell, Membu, and Banks are gone. So you're most likely not going to draft the 4th rated offensive tackle at 10. I think that would be a mistake. So then do you look at other talented options on offense? So do you look at a Omarion Hampton at running back? Do you look at a Emeka Egbuka wide receiver, a Colston Loveland at tight end? Those will be 3 options that if you're just looking at good football players, you could go at that point. Like, do you want, I don't particularly think that this will be the case, but do you want to go Tet at like 10? I don't think so.
I don't think
so.
I don't think you're asking me.
I said that I'm not a big fan of Mason Graham, but I know that the Bears do like him. So if I had to guess where they would go in that situation, they would probably go Mason Graham, even if it wouldn't be the selection that I would do at that point. I'm kind of in between going for the offensive playmaker versus the best available defensive player at that point. The best defensive player at that point, if I'm looking at it overall, is probably Jihad Campbell that we were talking about, even though the positional value doesn't kind of match up. So then you're weighing up of, is that going to be more valuable versus you drafting Colston Loveland, who's would be a similar kind of fit to what we see Sam Laporta in Detroit, or a Marion Hampton? Do you think that he is the 1A to kind of what Ashton Jeanty could be? And I think those would be the three main options in my head. I would either look at, if you think that Hampton is just maybe a notch below Jeanty, but still, if you value him as in the 15 to 18 range, there's no problem taking him at 10, in my opinion. Do you like Colston Loveland at the same as you like Tyler Warren? You could do that. In terms of the defensive guys, you mentioned it in terms of Derek Harmon, the fact that his injury came out this week, because he was a guy that we've kind of spoken about over the last few weeks, that he would have been at kind of the top of my list, because you just look at him and he's just like a good football player. So I think if you were stuck in that situation, I would probably be looking at either Hampton or Loveland. And then it comes down to what's going to be more valuable for your offense. Is it going to be having that kind of two-headed monster with DeAndre Swift in getting a Marion Hampton, or is it going to be more important to go for your tight end? For me, I look at where the strength of the draft is at this point. If you're not getting the kind of superstar running back in Ashton Jeanty, I kind of lean towards Colston Loveland, because I'm not a big believer in what Cole Kmet has done over the last couple of years. And I feel like if you can add that extra dimension that happened with Detroit when Sam Laporta came in there, that's probably where I would go. Do I love having Colston Loveland at 10? No, but I value him in the mid first round range. So if I was looking at offense and the scenario came up like this, he'd probably be the guy that I would pivot towards.
Loveland is the aforementioned offensive player that we talked about. We're going to talk about his medicals, because it just seems like everybody that might be a tier 2 option for the Bears at 10, if the bad things happen, they all have shoulders. Mm-hmm. I swear to God, it's Harmon and Loveland. Like, Loveland has health issues, and I like Loveland as a player a lot. I heard someone earlier this week compare him to if you mashed Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown together in terms of the role he plays in the offense, and I can't unsee it. Like, yes, he is a very good power slot receiver. He is a try-hard blocker. He has the want to. He is not a great blocker. He's a good pinch blocker at the end in line, where he can just lean on the guy and kind of mash him into the tackle. He's okay in space. He's not great. Again, he tries really hard, but he gets bent backwards just as many times as he goes forward. So, if you're looking at the result as opposed to the effort. But as a receiver, like, if you're using Colston Loveland as your lead blocker, you're doing it wrong. Like, that's not why you drafted him in the first place. He is an elite route runner. He is very crisp with his hands away from his body, catching the football. He is an offensive threat. He could come in and immediately produce 500, 600, 700 yards in a given offense if he was featured. He's that good. You have to be comfortable with the medical sheet, obviously, but I'm pretty sure that Ben would know exactly how to use him. So I'm comfortable from that regard, but not comfortable with the medicals. Hampton, I love Omarion Hampton, have for 2 years. I think there is a gap between Jeanty and him. I also think there are going to be some really good backs available at 39 and 41. So that's going to be weighing on my mind in terms of, hey, if I do this, what am I going to get down there? Or vice versa. If I pick a back down there, what could I get here? And what's the drop off in that position? And that's probably bigger if you're looking at somebody like Jihad Campbell as the inside linebacker. I saw somebody say, take the Oregon tackle, right? Josh Connolly Jr. And if you're going to take a tackle, I would do it right there, because when you get to 39, folks, they're not going to be tackles anymore. Like, everybody said, oh, there'll be tackles. I'll get this guy. I'll get that guy. No, you won't. Those guys are going off the board. The tackles are going to go fast. There's not a ton of them, and people are going to get Well, people are desperate and they're going to get greedy. And those tackles, just like they do every single year, are going to go off the board faster than you think. And a couple of weeks ago, I too was thinking, hey, if Josh Connerly gets to 39, that would be a great book. Josh Connerly's not getting to 39, folks. He'll be lucky to get to 25. So if you want the tackle, same as what you said about some of the other positions, if you're comfortable taking them at 18 or 20 and you're at 10, you can't move down, you're not going to get him the next time your pick comes up at 39. You're either going to have to package something and try and trade back in, which is dangerous business, or you just take him. Now, do I, just like Colston Loveland at 10 for you, do I love Josh Connerly at 10? I love Josh Connerly, the player. Do I love him at 10? I don't necessarily, but if you're going to get him, that's where you're going to have to pick him if you're the Bears. So, again, this is the worst case scenario. This is not the fun car scenario, right? This is not the fun V. This is the one that got blown up in Iron Man. And we're having to go over the landmine path here. And it would not be fun. A lot of people saying Josh Simmons. It's not Josh Simmons. I guarantee it, especially not for the Bears. There are injury concerns and there are off-field concerns as well. So he is not there on their board at 10. It would be a while. And other teams, cough, cough, Chiefs, would pick him before the Bears would ever venture into those waters. Now, on field, tremendous player, best left tackle in the draft, in my opinion. The Bears are not picking Josh Simmons. I would be stunned if that happened for multiple reasons.
I will say, if he's one of the top 3 offensive linemen that does get taken, then I would have no problem if they picked whoever did fall. Yeah. If it was Banks, if it was Membu, or if it was Campbell, if one of them fell,
sure.
Then I don't even think twice. And one of those guys would be my pick at 10. But again, what you're saying is what a lot of teams probably already know, and I would highly doubt he's going to be one of the top 3 offensive linemen taken.
Yeah, Arden says Simmons is going to the Chiefs. Yes, I think that is like foretold in the stars. Oh, yeah. That is going to happen. So occasionally you see those fits with teams and you're just like, yeah, this is going to This is a huge need for them, and they're also okay with the things that a lot of other teams are not okay with. So again, as long as they're okay with his medicals, yeah, I would not be at all shocked. In fact, I would be like, if Josh Simmons becomes a Chief. So, all right, those are our 3 scenarios that we wanted to prepare you for. Now we're just going to dive into the questions because you all are gracing us with your presence, and we deeply appreciate it. Riding with us, we know we've been a little bit inconsistent during draft season, but basically when we've had good content, we've brought it to you. And that's sort of the path we'll forge going forward over the offseason. Once we get back to the season, we will be weekly again. So, I tried to roll a couple of these in as we've talked about them. But if you've got other questions about the chat, be sure to throw them in there. We got a lot of pushback about not taking Mason Graham yesterday, and I shouldn't say we because it's not my draft. I'm just there to chirp and react to the picks. It's Brett's picks. He does not share them with me beforehand, which is kind of fun too. But everybody was like, "What are you doing? Did you just forget that Mason Graham exists?" And the answer is no. I think Mason Graham is going to be a very solid player in the league. He has a very high floor. He's a great character guy. We've been talking about a bunch of questionable character guys. He's a great character guy, absolute hard worker by all accounts from everybody at Michigan. Very talented, but I think he is a high floor, low ceiling player. And I was talking to somebody from Jacksonville last week, and they said, I think he might play 8-9 years in the league, which is a lot for a defensive tackle. It's 3 times the typical average of an NFL player, which is about 3.6 years at this point. So it's a good career. I know it sounds short, but it's a good career. And they say he might make 2 or 3 Pro Bowls. And that would be the thing, right? And if you look at that and you say, okay, that's the career he's going to have, do you feel terrible about not picking him in the top 10? No, I'd feel really good, especially even in this draft, picking that guy at 15 to 25. You know what you're getting. You're getting a great motor player who has, not great measurables, doesn't win on first blush a lot. He does, but he does a lot more cleanup because he just keeps working. And that's a valuable trait to have, but it's less valuable to NFL decision makers when they're looking at pass rush. If you can't win quickly and cleanly, they'll still take you. Absolutely. You need all kinds in an NFL pass rush room, but they're not going to take you with a top 10 pick. So it's not that I don't like Mason Graham. I think he's a very good football player. And again, he's got a very high floor. He's one of the safer players in this draft. If you need safe and you need that contribution on your defensive line, I think we had him ended up going to Tampa Bay. That would be a steal for them. an absolute killing, and they can mix and match him with the guys they've got, and he'd fit in really well there. So it's not anti-Mason Graham slander. It's that I think it's a bit like the star system in high school where a kid gets rated really early, like he's a late sophomore or an early junior in high school, and they're like, this kid's a 5-star. And then everybody else continues to mature and get good. And they're like, well, all these guys are 5 stars and he's not as good, but we can't take his star rating down. Like there's all this hype preseason for Mason Graham. And, Michigan had a very good season the year before, won the Natty. So everybody's like, Mason Graham. And he played well. But he didn't play as well as a bunch of other tackles in this draft. And everybody was just kind of slow to get with that when they were watching his tape, and nobody really wanted to move him down because everybody had all this hype about him. And when you stack him up against the other defensive tackles in this draft, you kind of go, oh, he's good, but I don't know that he's as good as these other guys. And it's just tough, I think, for a lot of people to accept that a guy that had all that preseason hype doesn't necessarily have the same amount of pre-draft hype.
Yeah, I think for me, it was when you saw the preseason hype, I always like to watch those guys throughout the year and see, do they stand out? And he was one of those guys that I wanted to love, because you're looking at guys that could potentially maybe get linked with the Bears, especially as the losses started to pile up for the Bears. You're looking at who are the potential guys that you could get that could be difference makers. And the way he was being projected, you were like, okay, he could be in the range. And every time you watch him, it's like, I like him, but I don't love him to the point of where people are saying he's one of the 3 best players in this draft. I don't see it. And that's where you should be. Now, look, if he goes and he gets picked at 10 by the Bears, you can see the benefit of having him within the rotation with Javon, with Billings. Obviously, Grady Jarrett comes in. There's not a whole lot of expectation where he doesn't have to be out there every single snap, and he gets to learn from a guy like Grady Jarrett, and I think that he could do quite well. But again, I think I'm trying to shoot a little bit higher to where if you can get a Ashton Jeanty or a Tyler Warren, like those are guys that I look at and I feel really good about. And I feel like I know exactly what they are coming into this, and the potential for those players I just think are higher. And that's what kind of I would be looking at going into this. And it's an interesting one. Before we get into all of the comments, there was a question I put out today that I randomly thought about when I was thinking of the 2 extensions that the Bears did, the one for Kyler Gordon and the one for TJ Edwards. And I went back to the first draft for Ryan Poles, and he was picking in a very similar position to where he is now, 2 second-round picks. And the one player that the minute that the first round ended, I think we both kind of said it separately, was that Kyler Gordon would be a guy that I'd like to target. So I wanted to just ask the chat while some of the comments come through, who's that player for you this year that maybe right now is being projected at the end of the first round at the moment, but you hope falls into the second round? So as we answer the questions, I want to see some of those answers kind of come into the chat. We'll go through some of them as well. It's one that I find very interesting, because I know a lot of the talk has been around number 10, but we've said it as well. We need to treat this as 10, 39, 41 as a group. So who are some of those guys that, for all you guys listening to us right now, want to fall down into that kind of 39 range?
Yeah, and I'll just throw this one out because we've been talking about Mason Graham as a high floor player, high character player, high effort player. The player, if I'm going to flip the script and put that on offense, but I actually like his ceiling more than I like Mason Graham's in his particular role, is Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah,
because Emeka Egbuka is one of the highest character players in this draft, one of the top 2 according to decision makers that I've talked to or heard from. Just absolutely clean sheet. He's tremendous as a receiver. He is bigger than your typical slot, faster than your typical possession guy, great hands, blocks his ass off. Just everything you want in terms of a very high floor player in a position that is incredibly expensive. So if he comes in and is let's say, has a similar career, makes, 3 Pro Bowls in 10 years, you're going to save a ton of money if you pick Emeka Egbuka and you get him on a rookie control contract, especially in the first round, because you've got 5, essentially 6 years worth of cost control over Emeka Egbuka. Now, do I think Emeka Egbuka at 10 is a great value? Not necessarily, but you're not going to get him at 39. He'll be off the board. So if you're sort of that up a creek position and you just don't know what to do, I wouldn't be shocked by it, because you know exactly what you're getting. You know exactly how Ben will use him. And I know people argue to the rafters, oh, he'll be the 5th or 6th target in a Ben Johnson offense, blah, blah. I know. I don't care. I got my sticky note. Now I can cross it off. I got a good football player in the first round. Like, I'm cool with it. So there's my high floor guy that it's, it'd be a wild card pick, but I would sleep like a baby. If my ideal need as a GM was to sleep well the first night after the draft, I would pick Emeka Egbuka and laugh all the way to the bank. All right, we got some other questions in the chat here. Somebody mentioned Nick Emmanwori, the safety from South Carolina. He would be a really fun pick because he's got the size of a linebacker. He's got the speed of a very fast corner. A bunch of people have talked about the transitions that guys like Divine Diablo have made. I could see that. I don't think he's necessarily going to be as good in that role, but he is a bang-on safety. He is great in coverage. He's not just a workout wonder. He would be a really fun pick. At 10? No. Is he probably going to go in the first round? He is, because he's an absolute alien, and somebody, again, at the end of the first round will go, this is a great value. If he's on the board at 39, safety is a bigger need for the Bears than people are talking about, because Byard is in a contract year and Brisker is probably 1 more or 2 more concussions away from never playing again. And he might get no more concussions. He might get a concussion in training camp and never see the field this year. So that gives you a lot of question marks at safety, not a lot of answers. There are some solid backups, but they are backups for a reason. I think the Bears would probably come out of this draft with a safety because they need one for sure. And the depth is better than I thought. I really thought safety was super thin before I dug deep. A couple of weeks ago on the weekend, I sort of went through all the mid to late round safeties I hadn't gotten to. And I was like, wow, there's a bunch of these guys that can play that are going to be available down the board. Again, the Bears are not going to have to spend a high pick. They would on Emmanwori, but I think the Bears probably come out with safety one way or another. And if they chose to do it high because Emmanwori was the top valued player available that was still on the board at 39 for them, I would not be sad. He's a really fun player. He's dynamic. I think, again, there's probably better uses for 39 and 41, but that's just a pure value of like, hey, we thought this guy was absolutely going in the first round. He's still here. Do we want to take him? Because we do have a need. So we will see. Great player, really fun. Nathaniel Law says, I remember hearing early on that Kelvin Banks was pretty underwhelming. Now people are hyping him up. Where do you guys stand? You did not hear me saying Kelvin Banks was underwhelming. I've seen him twice live in person. I saw him versus UTSA. I saw him versus Kansas in 2 consecutive years. I saw him at the Combine. He's an impressive guy. And if you go back to last year's Texas tape and watch them running the football to the left, it's all Kelvin Banks picking up targets on the second level. I heard the other day that, he can't pick up targets in space. And I was like, he sometimes misses targets in space, but when he hits targets in space, which is more often than he misses, he annihilates them. Like, that guy is an absolute bulldozer, and he can really move. So you didn't hear me saying Banks was any kind of average. Like, I think he's a very good tackle. I think also he is a guy that I would absolutely try at tackle before I moved him anywhere, because I think he can play tackle. But if he moves into guard, I also feel really good about him there because of his lower half, how he sets his base. He's got plays with good power. He needs to develop his upper body power, but it's not bad now. So I think he has a pretty high floor at guard, where there's a bunch of tackles in this draft where I would not say that, where I actually like them at tackle. Guys like Logan Brown or John Williams, like they're good movers in space, but they're weak up top, and their downside, the reason they're going to get picked later right now, is because they can't handle bull rush. I don't want to move that guy to guard. He's going to be across from a 320 pounder like every down. So no, I really like Banks. I think he's a good player. I think he's going to go off the board way before a lot of people think he's going to, again, because the tackle market is thin, and he's a quality player.
Yeah, he's one of I think he was the first prospect in this draft class that I did a film study on, and this was prior to the college football playoff, because he was one of the guys that as we kind of knew closer to that time where the Bears were going to be picking, that he was an option. And you mentioned it, it's the athleticism is there. I always like to see is, do they pass the eye test? And for the most part, yes, he passes the eye test. So I always thought that if he was to pick a 10, he'd be the safe pick. I don't think like I said, you want a guy that you are going to project to be your left tackle, but if it doesn't work out and he's not your left tackle, can play elsewhere.
Yeah.
And my biggest worry with guys like Will Campbell, Armand Membu, if they can't play offensive tackle, I don't know how well they project if you have to push them inside. And that's where I think I would be more comfortable in selecting Banks, kind of knowing roughly what you're going to get from him. In terms of Campbell, if he can be your left tackle and you can shove him there, the talent is there. But we mentioned it before, it's more worrisome that if he can't play there, then you're kind of struggling to see where he's going to fit into your offensive line. Membu, I like him. I think he's very, very talented, but I don't want to move Darnell Wright. I want to keep him at right tackle. So it all comes down to, can Membu play left tackle? We don't know that. The teams will know it more than we will. So in that regard, Banks is a guy that if the Bears are picking an offensive tackle at 10, I think I'd hope it was him. Now, I've heard the same thing that you said. There's teams within that top 10 that they assume that Banks is the third offensive tackle. For some of those teams in the top 10, it's different, where he's their first offensive tackle. So I think it's very unlikely that he gets to the Bears. We've obviously mentioned the Saints as one because of Ryan Ramczyk getting or retiring. So I think it's very unlikely any of those first three offensive tackles are going to go, because we've seen it the last couple of years where it's been like 5 days out and people are like, oh yeah, there'll be an offensive tackle there at 10, 11, 12. And then suddenly it's a day before and people are projecting Paris Johnson Jr. to be the number 4 pick at the draft. So that's where, or the year after that, where everyone was like, yeah, Joe Alt is the only offensive tackle that's going to be in the top 10. Then JC Latham gets picked straight after. So I think that the Bears are going to be in that situation where maybe Banks gets there if one of those other guys falls down a little bit, but I think it's going to be tough. But if he is to pick a 10 for Bears fans, you should be happy, because I think at a certain point he's going to be able to be productive on that offensive line. So I know I've seen a lot of Bears fans be kind of against that pick, and I think it's purely because he wasn't being put in mock drafts for about 3 months to the Bears, and that really doesn't matter, guys. Like, good player, and that's what you want to look for here at 10.
Yeah, no, and tackles always roll up into the top half of the week of 2 weeks. People just go, well, we don't know what to do. We're going to pick a tackle, because again, they're very expensive. If you hit, it is an incredible boon to your franchise, both financially and from stability sake. J.R. Krenzel says, I know the Bears won't draft Mike Green, but he is exactly what we need. Yes, you are 100% dead on. If Mike Green was a clean character prospect, we would not be having this conversation. We probably wouldn't even be saying that Mike Green was available, because he'd be getting picked at 5 or 6, because he is an edge rusher with burst and bend. He plays with power. He plays the run very well. He is exactly what the Bears could use on the field. The reason he's not getting picked by the Bears is because of the off-the-field stuff, both in high school and college. And yes, you're correct. They're not going to pick him. But yes, if there was that player. And the problem is there isn't a player like that behind him. The players behind him, down to probably Donovan Izraku, who is a very good player in his own right, have questions before, from Abdul Carter to Izraku, which is a couple of edges, probably by most people's ranks. Those edges have questions. And so they're probably not going to end up being Bears. Do the Bears need that? Yes, they do. Does it line up with their value at 10? It does not. So you are absolutely correct, JR. And it is frustrating, because in a typical year, you'd just be kind of pivoting to the next edge and going, well, we like him a lot. He's a pretty good fit at 10. Again, all the things we've said about offensive tackle and wide receiver and everything else. It's an expensive position. If you hit on it, it works really well. They have the need. It just doesn't line up this year. That's just this draft. So Quasar, with how shallow the QB market is, does Bajan have any trade value to move in the draft? No, he does not. Nobody's going to give a pick for Tyson Bagent because there are multiple guys down the board that are Bagent equivalent. Not the same in terms of being the same player, but have the same particular upside, and you're going to be able to get them with a third or fourth. Guys like Seth Hennigan from Memphis, right? You really throw the ball. If I was the Steelers, I would have a big black and yellow star right next to Seth Hennigan's name. He throws a really pretty deep ball. He's got great ball fakes on play action. And if that's the way you're trying to run your offense, which is, play action fakes to your running backs and deep shots to DK and potentially George Pickens, if he's still there, that Hennigan would be a great fit down the board as a developmental guy. So I don't think Bagent really moves anybody's needle for a draft pick. People are pretty miserly with draft picks anyways. They don't want to give them up. And if you sort of floated that you might be willing to get rid of Bagent, people would just wait for you to do it and then pick him up. So no, nobody's going to be clamoring at your door for Tyson Bagent. Karen, you see any that you really want to answer?
Yeah, so there's one here that I think is interesting. Well, there's two, but I'll go from Paul Huxley. Says, how do you guys rate Jeanty versus other top running back prospects in previous years? Nothing against him, but is it more him being great or the other prospects not being great? I don't think, obviously, it's not the second part of that, not too much, but I think it's an interesting one when you look at from previous years. And I think I want to go back to the draft where we did see kind of Detroit take Jahmyr Gibbs and obviously kind of what the Atlanta Falcons did in that particular year. And I think that's the only one that you kind of look at in recent times that you kind of go back to some bona fide talented players within that top 10. And again, for me, and I'll let you kind of talk about this as well, Jeanty's right up there because of some of the things that he does within the offensive scheme that we're going to look at for Ben Johnson that's different to DeAndre Swift. And it's a reason why he's just different for me in terms of you look at what he does after he gets hit. Like, he doesn't go down. These are the type of guys that you want, but also has the athleticism as well. So it's not just like a bulldozer. Mm-hmm. Those guys are hard to find. Guys that are shifty, that, again, one of the things that I like about him is he doesn't rush anywhere. Like, he waits to see where the hole is, and once he sees the hole, okay, well, then he bursts through. And then good luck trying to get him down with the first tackle. And those are things that sometimes you just can't teach these guys. Like, I've said it many times, I'm a massive fan of Ohio State, but I love TreVeyon Henderson, but we kind of have a TreVeyon Henderson light in DeAndre Swift already, where I think he's going to make a team very, very happy because the blocking is already there. You don't have to worry about him in that regard. But the criticism that Bears fans have for DeAndre Swift, it will be the exact same criticism that we'll have for TreVeyon Henderson if he was a guy that came to the Bears. Really good in space. But when a hole opens up, he's a little bit late getting there or does run a little bit into his offensive lineman at times, and it's been a problem. You have, when I look at the other guys in this draft class, I love guys like Caleb Johnson, you have Quinshon Judkins, or Jay Harvey. Like, we've spoken about them, DJ Giddens. These are guys that are really, really good. So it's not just that Ashton Jeanty is just an amazing prospect within this draft class and the other guys aren't very good. This is one of the most talented running back classes that we've had in a couple of years, and he's still being talked about as a top of the range. I think you have to go back to that kind of Jahmyr Gibbs draft class to kind of put him in at that point where would he get as high from those two running backs that were picked that year? Would he be a top 10 pick? I think so, because some of the things that he does, you can't teach. And also, the guy off the field is one of the most impressive guys within this draft class. Like, you just listen to his backstory of where he had to go abroad to Italy for a year, and even with doing that and not getting to play football, still comes back and the motivation is there to become a professional athlete there. And there's other guys that maybe in that same situation without playing football for a year come back and aren't as motivated. I look at a guy like him, he wants to be great. He performs on the biggest stage when he has that opportunity. And for me, he's well deserving of this draft hype or draft publicity that he's getting, where teams are, or where people are saying, oh, he should be picked in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For me, he's definitely deserving, even when you do compare him to the last few draft classes, because I think he is that good.
He's really that good. I've been working on draft rankings for Bootleg Football. We release ours every year, and we put out a big data table with each positional ranking that really, it's curated stats that I think matter. It's not just fluff stats. It's ones that I think really speak to how good these players are and helping define who they are as players. So there's 18 columns. Well, I guess there's 16 columns, not including height and weight. And I highlight the leader of the class in green and the second player in the class in yellow for any particular stat that they lead. So out of the 16 performance category stats, Ashton Jeanty is first or second in 10 of them. He is first in 7 and second in 3 out of 18. These include things like attempts, rush yards, again, and the difference is what really spells it out. So rush yards, 25.95 for Ashton Jeanty. The next closest player is 17.12. 800 yards less. Rushing TDs, 29 to 22. That's 7 more. Well, 7 out of just about 30 is a significant percentage. Missed tackles forced, 152 for Ashton Jeanty. Next closest player, who was really good this year, 103. Again, 50% more than the next best guy in the class. He's just head and shoulders above the other players. This is the one that kills me. He had 1,970 yards after contact. He had almost 2,000 yards after he got touched. That's bonkers. Like, it's not even close. So he is a wildly talented back. He is deserving of all the hype. If he ends up by some stroke of miracle luck being a Chicago Bear, you will be quite thrilled with his performance. He is a very, very, very good back. I would say generational, and I say that to mean 20 years, not 5 years, because every year somebody says, oh, we have another generational guy. I was like, didn't you have a generational guy like last year too? Like that doesn't mean generational. To me, when you start comparing Ashton Jeanty, you're comparing him to guys like Adrian Peterson, to guys like LaDainian Tomlinson. Like, that's where his stat profile and the difference between him and other players in this class, which is a loaded class, by the way. This is running back and DT are the best position groups in this draft. So Ashton Jeanty, great, great player, well deserving of all the hype. If he somehow ends up in Chicago, bully for us, because it'll be awesome. There's a question from Ethan here that I really want to answer. So Ethan, longtime watcher of the pod, and Bootleg and Bears and Beers as well. Which player are you going to be relieved when he goes off the board to another team, knowing it means the Bears won't be able to take him? And
I already know. I
have a stack of these guys every year. So I love this question. I have no shortage. Let's just rapid fire back and forth. Who's yours? Because I might steal it.
Shamar Stewart.
Yep, Shamar Stewart. Okay, I figured we'd probably double up on that one. But there are multiple other players. When you look at it, doesn't mean they're a bad player. It's just you don't necessarily like the fit, or you're worried about injury or play style or something else. And it goes both ways. There's a stack of players who you're really excited about, and when the Packers invariably pick 3 of them, you're just pounding the table and pissed. And then there's other players where you're like, oh please don't. Okay, cool. Micah Williams is one for me. Like him as a player, I think he'll be a fine fit if he ends up a Bear, because it could happen. He's a perfect fit for what DA's preference is for defensive ends. I will breathe a sigh of relief if somebody else takes that chance, right? Not saying he's not going to work out. I think he probably will, actually. I don't think he's going to be awesome. And again, I would prefer – it's like an opportunity cost situation. It's like, well, what else could you have had at that pick? And somebody was talking about Nick Scorton in the chat earlier on. I would rather have a Nick Scorton. I would rather have a Braden Swinson. I would rather have a lot of other things. I don't need a Michael Williams way up high, which is where you're going to have to pick him. And that's probably the benefit is like if he goes at 15 or 18 or 20 or 22, he's not really in the Bears range. And some of the team will be very happy with their pick. And I'll be happy the Bears didn't pick him. And we just move on. Like that's the way the draft goes. Any others that are on your list that you just are like, oh, please don't pick that guy?
There's a couple.
There's always a few. You always have a stack.
Yeah, so I'll stick with the first round guys, and I'll do a couple kind of later guys as well. Mainly because of the red flag, obviously. Mike Green's one. James Pierce Jr. is another one that I know a lot of people like. I don't want them. They're just, again, they're guys that I'm not huge on. In terms of, look at the offensive tackles, I have my deep concerns about Josh Simmons in terms of what has been kind of coming out. But then also, if you're looking at those top guys and being at 10, I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'm worried about Will Campbell. Would I try and kind of pull myself around and be like, oh, that's great. It's just there's other guys that I would prefer at that position. So those would be kind of the guys I think if I'm looking at 10. I think you mentioned one of the obvious ones was Will Johnson because you worry when a guy like that doesn't run. And
you mean a Michigan guy?
Yeah. And then suddenly it comes out that injury concerns and it would be different if like there was a corner at 10 and you're like, yeah, this guy's a bona fide superstar corner, different story. But yeah, he would be one of the other guys kind of early on in the draft that if the Bears were being linked to, I'd have a lot of hesitation. Well,
before anybody jumps on me and says that I'm anti-Michigan, I'm not anti-Michigan. Michigan talks ad nauseum about their strength. Well, you as an Ohio State fan, I understand that. I'm more neutral, but in terms of Michigan, I'm not taking shots at the program for what they do on the field. Off the field, they say they have an amazing strength and conditioning program, which they do. They've had 30 athletes drafted in the last 3 years. 3 of them have run full slates.
Madness.
So don't talk to me about how awesome your program is and then hide all your guys. And when everybody even comes to campus and shows up for pro day, you're like, we're not going to test. We test all the time. We have all these amazing facilities. We post all these crazy videos of guys doing squats and jumping upstairs and doing all kinds of stuff. And yeah, you produce a lot of really good athletes. I'm not going to say you don't, but don't say that and then turn around and go, yeah, but we're not going to do it for you. Like that bugs me, right? You got to test if you're going to put that up as a strength of your program. You don't hide your guys. You tell them to go out and test. Right? Penn State's guys go out and test. They say the same thing. Oh, we've got this amazing conditioning program. And they do. And they turn out a lot of really good athletes. Their testing percentage is a lot higher than Michigan's for a comparable type school. So it's not anti-Michigan propaganda. It's, hey, if you're going to say your guys can test them. Don't say they can test and then say, yeah, but, my girlfriend goes to another school. You wouldn't know her. That doesn't work. Somebody in the chat asked me to list a bunch of safeties that I like. So I'm just going to be guys naming dudes for like 25 seconds. We got the 4 guys at the top: Starks, Emanwari, Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, and Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, who was hurt most of this year, but was amazing in his tape last year and had a 0.0 missed tackle percentage last year. He literally didn't miss a tackle all last season, which is ridiculous for somebody playing safety. Great physical skills. Again, stop me if you've heard this one before. Penn State safety, very fast, hits like a truck. Love him. So those are your top 4. And then there's this, I would say, kind of wide middle of the safety class that I thought was a lot thinner before I dug in. So Andrew Makuba from Texas, I've talked about a ton. Great free safety prospect. I'll save one. Jonas Sanker from Virginia, also a really good player, better in pass coverage. I thought he was just a, sort of a come forward from the box guy, a hitter. He's a really good player in pass coverage as well. RJ Mickens, is a player that I went through a total roller coaster with. Liked him during the season, saw his name on the Shrine Bowl list, got all excited, watched him tape, went to Shrine Bowl. He had kind of an average Shrine Bowl. He did not have a great event. And I went, ooh, was that wrong? And so I waited and I came back and I watched a little more tape and I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm wrong. Then I watched him at the combine. I watched him move, watched him run in the drills. And I was like, damn, he's really good. Came back, did my full workup. I was like, nope, I'm back on the RJ Mickens train. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up with the Bills. Sean McDermott would love RJ Mickens. Really, really smart player. Craig Woodson, California, thought he was just a hitter. Couldn't have been more wrong. That Cal secondary was loaded. They got 2 corners and a safety who are all going to get drafted and all play really well. Somebody's going to get a deal with Craig Woodson. They're going to pick him in like the late 3rd, the 4th, maybe even the top of the 5th because they're sleeping on him. And he's going to come in and play for like 8-9 years in the league. And everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah, Craig Woodson. Marquise Siegel from Kansas State, absolute torpedo. Love him. Agent of chaos. Not a great pass coverage option, but he will blow shit up. Billy Bowman Jr., same thing from Oklahoma. My problem with Billy Bowman is his missed tackle rate is really high. It's either you're going to blow somebody up or you're going to miss, like 23%. I'm not kidding. It's really high. Love his play style, though, and is one of my proudest draft cycle moments of this year. I was watching Billy Bowman, doing my full workup on him, and I was like, I know who he reminds me of. He reminds me of Mike Brown. And I don't say that lightly, being a Bears fan. And I shared that with another analyst, Matt Bone, who played defensive back in the league. And Matt was like, that's who I comped him to on the radio last week. And Matt and I had not talked about that. I was like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. This is great. Wild card, Robert McDaniel from Jackson State. He's a weird one. He's super funny. 6'2", 221. He had like 200-something snaps in the box. 170 snaps in the slot and 148 lined up as a wide 9 as an edge rusher. So he's just around the line messing stuff up, and he's really good at it. Not a typical profile, but a really fun player. And then Keaton Crawford from Nevada. Was watching Nevada defense, and I saw him run at the combine, and I was like, man, this guy can really move. What the hell's he doing at Nevada? Yeah, he was recruited to Texas. He was a 4-star safety out of Denton. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know why you ended up in Nevada, but it makes sense that you stopped at Texas first because you have that kind of talent. Free safety can really fly. And then the one nobody's talking about, which drives me nuts because they lumped him together with your guy, the Ohio State safety, Lathan Ransom. But they always say these 2 names like in tandem, like they're brothers or something. It's like Lathan Ransom and Malachi Moore. Couldn't be more different as prospects. A pre-injury, Lathan might have had a shot at that. Post-injury, Malachi Moore is the best safety nobody's talking about in this draft. Like, it's not even funny. I hope that the league is stupid enough to let Malachi Moore float down to the Bears. In the later rounds, it's going to be Eddie Jackson all over again. And I mean that in a complimentary way, like the good parts of Eddie Jackson when he got to Chicago, not the late career Eddie Jackson. Malachi Moore is a damn good safety, like in every way that you need to safety to be good. And nobody's talking about him. I see him consistently ranked in like the 4th and the 5th, way down like 3rd, 4th, 5th tier of safeties. And I'm like, what are you people talking about? Like, that's bananas to me watching his tape. Either they know something I don't know about medicals or off field, which I've heard neither of. Doesn't mean they don't exist. Just means I haven't heard. You watch that guy on tape, and the fact that he played for Alabama, not a small program, I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. So that's my soapbox. Guys naming dudes in the safety class. Lots to go dig into if you haven't checked those guys out. But also a lot to like and a lot of value. So if the Bears want a safety, they can get one in the 2nd. They could get one in the 3rd or 4th or wherever they end up with picks. Because I'm sure everybody in the chat's like, they don't know. Yeah, not right now they don't. But if they trade up, trade down, we'll see what they end up with.
Talking about trading up, there was a question here which it kind of links to things that we were kind of talking about before we came on here, where Joe says Baldy just posted that he's hearing a major trade up into the top 5 is coming. If Poles trades up to 4 and 5, what will we have to give up? So this is something that we've kind of spoken about, that where everybody was saying, oh, Bears should they trade down? And I think it was on our last live stream, we said there's probably more of a chance that they would trade up than trade down. Would I be surprised if they moved up? No. Do I want them to move up? No. stay where you are. But just for the sake of this question, if it is the Bears, and I'm not going to say 4 because I don't think they'll move to that point. I think
it starts at 5. I think it starts with Jacksonville.
Yeah, it starts at Jacksonville. So let's just, in the scenario that does happen, it's a tough one because you're moving up to that point because there's either a team willing to move up elsewhere or you genuinely think that the Raiders are going to pick your guy. And let's just say it is Jeanty.
Sure.
Unfortunately, a third round pick's not going to get done. And if it was with the Jets, you at 7, you're probably talking more of the 72, right? And I wouldn't like it, but I probably wouldn't be pissed. If you're giving up 41 or 39, I'd be kind of annoyed. I've said it before. If it means that you could potentially just if you could kind of do some pick swaps where you're not losing it all out this year and have to give up something next year, I would prefer that. But if I'm being realistic here, if you're calling Jacksonville or you're calling into that top 5, you're going to have to give up one of those second round picks. And that's why we've kind of been saying, look, if they move up and they get Jeanty, like half of me will be happy that you're getting a good player, but the other half will be like, it's a tough price to pay. And I think that's where you're looking at. You're either going to have to give away your first round pick next year, or you're going to have to give away one of the second round picks this year. It's just because of where you're trading up to. If you were only trading up to 7, you're probably looking at your 3rd. And you might get 5th back for that as well. But I think in terms of if you have to move up to 5, it's still always going to be a steep range when you're trying to move up into the top 5 of the draft. And yeah, I think that's probably where you're looking.
The only possible saving grace, and I'm not saying they should, would be that if Gladstone is a new GM who definitely tried very hard yesterday to gin this up. Like it's pretty clear at this point that's what that was. He was like, oh no, we're picking Jeanty at 5. We're going to pick Jeanty at 5. And everybody went, I don't know if he would, including me, given his history with the Rams, where he came from. I thought that seems weird. And then, kind of everybody's like, you're bluffing. Today it came out, yeah, he was just trying to gin up some interest in a trade. Seems like it might have worked. People definitely called. I don't know the trade's going to happen, but at least they called, which they wouldn't have done if he hadn't sort of taken that stance. So those conversations are open, but the only way it wouldn't sort of crack my soul in half, yes, I too would be thrilled about Ashton Jeanty being a Bear, obviously, is if they didn't have a lot of other offers and they're like, well, some picks are better than no picks, and we're going to get the same guy at 10 that we wanted at 5. So, we'll give you a cut rate. Again, they shouldn't. There's no reason for them to do that. You have to look at both sides of a trade. But the other thing is, I really don't think they're going to take Jeanty. If they stay at 5, I don't think they're taking Jeanty. Now, Raiders, totally different deal. Maybe you work a trade with them, but again, it's a pick down. Values drop quite a bit every pick in the top 10. So you'd have to pay less to do it. But again, if they really want him, they're not going to do that. So, and again, Jacksonville, yeah, they might not pick him, but they might not also give you the pick for a reduced price. But if you're paying full boat or even more, if they have generated enough interest that multiple teams are calling, then it becomes a race for a pick that high. And I want no part of that. I want out of that immediately. Like if you're like, hey, can you do me a favor? And they say yes for some reason. I mean, can't hurt to ask. I'm not saying they should or will. And they go, yeah, we'll give you a slight reduction. We'll give you a 10% reduction. Sure, you're getting a good player. You're back to the sticky note, and cost is going to be the cost. But if you're giving up 39 and something because somebody else is in the bid, no, let the draft come to you. There's a lot of running backs. You'll be fine with 1 or 2 of them down the board. Another interesting option is, with all the talk about tackles, if one Texas tackle is on the board at 10 and the Bears decide that's not who they want to pick, there is another team that is very interested in him. Hardcore. Houston wants Kelvin Banks Jr. bad.
Yeah.
And if he's on the board at 10, which I'm not saying is going to happen, he could well be off before then. There is a possibility that the Bears could take the Hail Mary. And again, they don't have to give a discount because that is a huge move for Houston to get all the way up to 10. And they will get compensated for it. But Houston is in dire straits for tackle, and they really like Kelvin Banks. So again, you've got need on one side. I think the Bears would entertain it at that point, especially if none of the players, if we talk about that nightmare scenario, are off the board. If Banks is the only one and you're looking at picking up a bunch of extra picks in a really even talent draft, yeah, I think they'd entertain it. For months, we've been saying they're not going to be able to trade down. We really didn't think they would because lack of quarterback talent, et cetera, et cetera. If this happened, if this Hail Mary happened, I think they would definitely listen. I'm not saying they would do it. But if there was nobody there that was just itching to come off your board and you could look at moving down, into the 20s, picking up a bunch of picks, and then maybe picking a guy like maybe you like Josh Connerly just as much as Banks and you can get him, down the board, maybe. Or maybe you are looking at Emeka Ibuka, or maybe Colson Loveland sliding with the injury or whatever. But if you think there's a comparable player down the board and you can get a bunch of picks to do it, we've been saying for months that wasn't a possibility. It might be.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting one. I'm at the point of where I'm fine if they stay at 10. I would if you go up to get a proper difference maker. Like I said, I'm not a fan of giving up the draft capital, but I'll suck it up to know that you're getting a player that's going to be able to contribute for you. And then same thing for if you move back. Let's say you are at 10, Kelvin Banks is the number one guy on your board, and you get that offer from Houston. Again, I wouldn't be too mad if they did move down because, like I said, I don't think there's going to be a very big difference between the prospect you could get at 10, 11, 12 versus the prospect you could be getting at 31, 32, 33. So in that regard, getting more picks is good. And then you'd be getting another pick most likely within that kind of day 2 range where everybody seems to say is the strength of the draft. There's a lot of really good players at that point. You open it up to where, okay, you're not going to get one of those high-end blue chip players, but you're going to get a lot of good players early in the draft, and that is also a way to build this thing up. There's really 2 ways to do it. You accumulate draft picks, you get good players in here that can add to your team, or you go out and try and get a difference maker. Those are going to be the 2 sides of the coin that Ryan Poles is going to have to look at here. Does he want to move up and get a guy that they believe is going to be very good? We've heard from Ben Johnson, we've heard from Cunningham, we've heard from Poles. They all have said the blue players, there's not a lot of them, but that there's a lot of players that are within their area at 10. But that doesn't mean that those are those bona fide guys that we heard them talk about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago when after free agency was over and they started talking about the draft at the owners' meetings. They all mentioned it's a very limited amount of blue players. So the question will be for them is, will they move up to get one of those guys? If they don't, they have to be open for business to move down if somebody else wants to move up. Because if you don't get a guy at 10 that you see as a blue chip player and you like a vast amount of players at 10 after that point, a bunch of those guys will probably be there if you move down to 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. If it was Pittsburgh that wanted to come up because they wanted to draft a quarterback or whatever, you moving down to 21, if the guys that you really like are not there at 10, it's going to be kind of a similar quality that if you were moved back to 13 or 14 versus moving back to 21. So I think if those blue chip players are not there and they don't fall to you at 10 and then there are offers, I think you'd be silly not to at least listen.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And it is going to be a question of movement. Again, one of the reasons the draft is going to be fascinating, is going to be interesting, is there's going to be more movement than we thought. And some of that movement might not be at the cost you think it normally should be, especially as you move down the draft and those draft values equalize. A third round pick is not worth a whole lot more than a fifth round pick point wise compared to a top half of the first round pick or a bottom half of the first round pick, where there's a huge difference in point value. So yeah, if they were going to move down with the Texans all the way to 25, they would get next year's one. That would be the price. And again, Houston's kind of over barrel. They need a tackle after what they've done. And if they think they have to do that, if they're going to put their stake in the ground and sell the farm for that, like, okay, we'll see. But you got to be open for business moving down, and you got to be creative about next year's picks as well. If you get later on in this draft, and again, you don't have to spend a high pick. If you need another fifth rounder, another sixth rounder, because a guy's still sitting there, I would look at doing that this year. They did it last year with Booker. I think that's going to work out under the new staff. We'll see. But I think there are going to be those opportunities where you get late into the sixth round on day 3. And you're like, I can't believe this guy's still sitting there and he doesn't cost anything. We should go get him. I think a bunch of teams are going to be looking at that option. Trump 2024 asked, would you give up a second rounder for Jameson Williams? Or no, I would not. Given the current trading market in the NFL, that would be a very high price for a guy like Jameson Williams, who has not produced a lot. I love Jameson Williams. He was my wide receiver 1 the year he came out. It was so cool to actually kind of see him hit a little bit last year. Loved it. Great. Second rounder? Oh, no, way too rich for me. Again, a fourth, maybe like a low fourth or a fifth, which is what, if you look around the league, even much more high profile players are getting traded for. If Ben signs off on him and says, yeah, I want that guy and what he brings to the offense, and you can get him for a fourth or fifth, sure. And that's not just me lowballing Detroit. That's looking around the league for what players actually go for, even more accomplished players, and saying, sure, at that point, I'd start talking about it. A second rounder, I would just hang up the phone. I don't even think I'd laugh. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's one of those guys when he was coming out where I was pissed he was taken within the division.
Yeah,
I was like,
sure.
He was one of those guys where you can't help but say that's going to be a good pick. And look, he's had his issues. Obviously, when he got selected, he was coming off a serious injury, so it was a bit of a risk for Detroit at that point. But then when he produces, he has a skill set that the Bears don't have. But the problem is the price is one, but also the suspensions is another. It's a tough one when you have a guy that has been suspended for different issues. Like, one was gambling, one was to do with some of the medicine that he was taking at the time. And look, doctors are supposed to do their job. I know people were talking about like what he was betting on, and it's kind of silly and stuff that it was within the facility, but rules are rules. He knew them and he still broke them. So there's guys like that where he doesn't have a clean slate for everyone. Yeah. Look, obviously,
which means his price is way lower than a second.
look,
that's a pretty good price.
If you want to tell me that the Bears can trade like a 2026 fourth round pick and you can get him, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, fine. I don't care. I'll do that. I'll pay him.
Go.
That's fine. I don't mind. But if you're talking about a second or third round pick, that you hang up the phone straight away, because you try and find that type of guy.
And those guys are in this draft. I mean, in terms of that skill set, not as complete or not to the level that Jameson Williams has it, but you can get guys in this draft in the third or fourth who could take the top off a defense in a very similar manner, who are better than the guys currently on the Bears roster, which is really what we're getting to. Like, is it an upgrade over Tyler Scott? Well, that's not super hard to do, and you can do it in this draft, in this receiver class. And it's not just one guy. Like, there's multiple options that you could look at to do that. So, again, a lower round pick for a player that the coach is familiar with and he vouches for him, sure. High value asset, not happening. Who would be the worst pick to see by the Packers? And the Packers have needs at wide receiver, and they have needs at corner. And And if the Packers pick Emeka Egbuka, I will take a quiet moment and bite probably all the way clean through my lip because that would suck. He's a great player and he would fit with them. And the other one that I just really wouldn't like to see, this is kind of on a personal level on the corner front, would be Trey Amos, the corner from Ole Miss. He also would be a really good fit for them. Benjamin Morrison would be great from Notre Dame if he's healthy because he's an insane man corner. Probably the most athletic man corner in this draft, which is saying something. But Trey Amos, the corner from Ole Miss, or Emeka Egbuka would make me go, it happened again. I hate it when they do this because they do it every year. Like there's easily, when you watch as many prospects as I do, there are 2 or 3 players that you've fallen in love with that end up being Packers, and you just kind of have to go, well, I hope they do well for 15 weeks a year. Like that's what I hope.
Yeah, unfortunately as well is once I saw that Egbuka had a 30 visit with Green Bay, there's a couple of guys that I know that are covered the team and asked them about that, and all of them rave about him. So it's like, if they have the opportunity to take a wide receiver and that's where they want to go with the first round pick, unfortunately, it seems like he's target number 1. So,
he's gonna be a Packer, and he's gonna be good because he's gonna be good no matter where he goes. And at that point, you just kind of have to take the Bears hat off and say, hey, I'm a fan of the player, and I don't want to see him do well against Chicago, but if he does well for the rest of his career, I'll just be a fan of him as a player in person, which I will be, because Emeka, great player. I didn't know this until last year when I started scouting him, but he went to high school like 15 miles that way. He played high school at Steilacoom, Washington. So I never got to see him play in high school, but I didn't know that. And strangely enough, who's the other one? Oh, another guy that was in the same recruiting class, Jeanty Johnny what is from even closer. He ended up playing up near Seattle. He transferred to a bigger school so he could get recruited, but he played like junior high ball like 4 miles down the road from me. So both guys that ended up at Ohio State, out of Washington State, and both really, really good players. So always cool and fun to have a local connection. Talisi Fuaga played down at Mount Tahoma, which is only probably 15 miles from me. So a lot of talent comes out of the area, but people ask me all the time, oh, do you follow high school football? No, man, I certainly do not. I do not have enough time to follow high school football. I'll go see Friday Night Lights sometimes just to watch. I don't really have any stake in it at all.
Yeah.
When I went to Texas, I was like, I want to see a Friday Night Lights game. So we went to the game in Austin. It was super fun. Loved it. Bands at halftime, whole bit. And the guy I was with local to Austin. So he's like, that guy's going to Purdue and that guy's going to Texas Tech and that guy's, on both sides, because the recruiting market down there is just bananas. I posted a thing a couple weeks ago about safeties, and there's 5 safeties in this draft who were Texas high schoolers. So you want a safety and you're a college in need, go recruit the little triangle in Texas where they all came from. A lot of talent down there.
Yeah, some of the guys I also don't want to be drafted within the division, which means they will be drafted within the division. Kyle Williams from Washington State.
Oh yeah,
he's one. No. Jalen Royals is another that I do not want to get drafted. Jahad Campbell, which I just know that he's probably going to be a Detroit.
Well, he was like Edge Cooper. Like Edge Cooper last year was like, oh yeah, he's definitely going to end up in the division, and he's a Packer. Like that's the double bad. But you just kind of knew it.
Yeah. So those ones are going to happen. Someone that's probably more mid range, just because I like him and would be a pretty decent fit if the Bears don't go edge rusher early on or like defensive end early on, is Jared Ivey from Ole Miss.
Oh yeah,
he's been one of kind of the go-to guys that I think would be good fits. And with that being said, he's going to be a Minnesota Viking. But yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, like, if you don't go Michael Williams, you can wait like maybe 3 rounds and go get a Jared Ivey and be pretty happy about it. Because he's a very good player on a stacked line, and still had good tape. Sometimes when you see players who are talented or highly recruited, they go to a line that has a lot of other talent. That talent just kind of sucks up all the stats, and you go, oh well, he didn't get any stats. Well, Jared Ivey still had stats on an Ole Miss line that has literally 4 other guys who are getting drafted. Yeah. So or 4 total guys that are getting drafted.
a healthy Derek Harmon would
Oh
suck.
God.
That would suck.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always know it's when it's the interior defensive lineman, the Packers will always pick the guy that you want.
That you liked. Yep.
Every single year. So
yeah, it's like receiver, safety, and interior defensive lineman. Occasionally offensive lineman, but those first three, like when it's coming up, if they have that need, you're like, well, it's gonna be somebody I like. I guarantee it.
The last few years, it's been Detroit. Every single draft, I'm like, God damn! Like the year where they went for Gibbs,
3 years in a row.
Yep. The year that they got Gibbs, and then Jack Campbell wasn't too much, but they get Brian Branch, they get Sam Laporta. I'm like,
I love that draft. I was actually lowest on Laporta. Like Laporta was not necessarily one of my guys. Danny Kelly was a big Laporta guy. I was like, I don't really see it. Like he's good, but again, I don't really care. But like I loved Campbell. I loved Branch. I thought Jahmyr Gibbs was super dynamic, right? I wouldn't have necessarily picked him where they picked him, but Brad Holmes has done a fantastic job since he arrived with Dan Campbell. And it really is that mind meld between GM and coach that you really want, that we hope Chicago now has, between Poles and Ben. But you see the results, right? They know what they want for their program, and they have rebuilt that team from the ground up and with great effect. And every time Detroit has a draft now, you're just like, it's another good one. Like they have a very solid plan in place. I'm starting to feel like them in a much shorter term in the way that I feel about like the Ravens and other teams that just every year you look at their draft and you go, well, they played the board really well. They let it come to them. They got what they needed. They got perfect fits. You look at that, and you're like, that guy's a Raven. That guy's a Raven. Like, and Detroit is swiftly moving into that category, I will say.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always the goddamn they did it again. Another, and it's like you'll see it. It'll be like the second. Everybody will be talking about the second round. And suddenly Detroit moves up into like the top 5 of the second round. And you're like, God damn it, exactly what they're going for.
It's the player I really wanted.
Yeah, that's the way it's going to go. But look, I think it's going to be interesting. These 48 hours, like you're going to hear all these rumors about trades because this is when it happens. The teams are talking to each other now, and they're talking to each other to get the scope of the deal for when the teams are on the clock.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, you'll hear it. If the Bears do move up to 5, you'll hear Ryan Poles say that.
Oh, yeah.
The deal was pretty much in place at the combine. Like, they won't say to that point, but they will say, like, the basis of these deals are done way beforehand. But now we start to hear when teams want to put things out there that there's teams interested in moving up to 5, or teams like the Giants will say, oh, we're open to moving back in case a team absolutely blows them away for an offer to get up to 3, when in reality it'll probably be the first 4 picks are what we expect, and then suddenly the draft starts to kick into high gear when you don't know what the Jags will do. It'll be one of those where everybody's expecting a trade, and then suddenly we see the little graphic saying the pick is in for Jacksonville. And then people freak out to be like, who are they going to take? But yeah, I think the first round this year is definitely going to be one of those that's going to be box office to watch. And I'm here for it because last year it was fairly predictable. This year it's definitely not. You're going to see guys that after the Bears pick that you're hoping will fall into the second round that go 10 picks earlier than what you think. So
at least. Yeah. It's
gonna be fun.
We're gonna wrap it up and get out of here. Let's see. Tomorrow I've got the Bootleg Football Draftsmas Eve stream. That one's gonna kick off at 4 p.m. Pacific. We're gonna go for a couple hours. That's a tradition we've done for the last 4 or 5 years. And then I'll be going right into live draft coverage for every pick in the draft. So Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning until we're done. And then I'm going to sleep a little bit. Kieran, what are you going to do?
Tomorrow I always do this right before the day before the draft. I do my one and only kind of mock draft of who I actually want the Bears to pick. So I always do that the day before. Then day of the draft, it's kind of chaotic in terms of just seeing what happens as the picks kind of tick off. And then I guess for us here, both myself and EJ, because of obviously time difference, we'll be releasing our review of the Bears' first overall select or their number 10 pick. Once the draft is kind of over, me will be a little bit earlier, I'd imagine. So I can actually go to sleep when it hits 25, 26, 27.
We're keeping you up, man. Start mainlining caffeine. We'll do it live after the draft ends. What's that, like 6 in the morning for you or something? 6 in the morning.
Yeah, 6 in the morning. So yeah, but then on the Friday before the draft, I will also on the channel here we'll do a little bit of a preview to round 2, and kind of similar enough we'll have our review, and same sort of deal with when it comes to day 3. We'll see how we're going there, but again we'll do a bunch of content around that. I know you're going to be live on Bootleg Football for the entire draft cycle, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be chaotic. Again, I'll be doing different things in terms of obviously reactions to certain Bears picks here, some like little streaming things probably on Twitter and stuff when if something crazy happens. But for the most part, again, we'll be reacting to the Bears picks. We'll be giving our analysis, like short analysis of those selections. We have a couple of cool graphics that will be coming out for you guys as well in relation to that. So we can't wait to get to that point. We've been working very hard on them. And then about a week after the draft is over, when I come back from New York and when EJ gets his well-deserved holiday, we will do a full breakdown of the Bears picks. If there's any notable UDFAs, we'll break those down as well.
Yeah, can't wait for that. There's going to be a lot of them this year. There's a lot of players that are not going to get drafted who are very talented, and smart general managers have started to optimize that process. So hopefully the Bears jump in, grab a few of those as well, because there will be very talented guys from all over the country who end up being quote unquote free talent. When we say free, that's in draft compensation capital. But yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out. This one's fun. Wanted to blow off a little bit of steam, give a Bears-centric view before the draft. Certainly put some names out there for you to go look into if you haven't been on the study train, and get yourself set so you can be happy or angry based on your newfound knowledge on Thursday and Friday. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a chaotic draft. It's going to be really cool. The Bears are going to come out better for sure. They are going to pick up a lot of good football players in this draft. Can't wait to tell you who those are. But until then, we will see you on social media, on this channel, and around, because we'll both be covering the draft for the next pretty much week solid almost at this point, feels like.
Yeah. Look, guys, make sure that you do stick with us. Make sure you like the video if you're listening to this back. And also, please do subscribe, and we'll see you next time.